1979. Margaret Thatcher becomes Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, President Carter gets attacked by a rabbit, there's snow in the Sahara Desert, the Iran hostage crisis begins, the births of the McDonald's Happy Meal, the Sony Walkman, and Kevin Hart. And on April 1st, Warner Cable expands the C3 Pinwheel channel from their Cube broadcasting system and rebrands it Nickelodeon. Now, Pinwheel was the backbone for the first ever all-children's network. It was the killer app, if you will. But it couldn't possibly carry Nickelodeon on its own. You needed a variety of programming, but coming up with an entire channel's worth of programming all at once is difficult. We'll be discussing the various tricks and experiments Nickelodeon tried to pull off during its first year just to get a foot in the door, and one of the first things they did was a strategy that many new channels were implementing at the time, though those channels tended to be locally owned UHF stations, not corporate-owned cable channels. I'm talking of the rebroadcasting of old media that's either fallen into the public domain or has really cheap licensing that anybody could buy the broadcasting rights to. Why spend thousands of dollars to fill an hour of television when you can just show old Laurel and Hardy shorts or the black and white Looney Tunes or It's a Wonderful Life for next to nothing? Now, to its credit, Nickelodeon never went, "Okay kids, here's some Felix the Cat to hold you over until the next airing of Pinwheel." They actually made a show around the cheap material they selected. They filmed a framing device and gave the program a proper name: Nickelflix. Nickelflix was a package show that aired old film serials, or as they're sometimes affectionately called, cliffhangers. Serialized stories told over many parts, usually about 20 to 30 minutes per part, with cliffhangers ending to get people excited for the next installment. Film serials were basically television shows before the invention of television, and therefore made a comfortable fit for the airwaves. Nickelflix holds a very unique distinction. It was the very first Nickelodeon show to be cancelled. It's the only show in the 1979 starting lineup not to make it to 1980, so it should come to no surprise that there is no known footage of the show. Between VCR still being a very new and expensive technology, Nickelodeon only being available in a few limited territories to start with, and the limited time the show was on the air, the chances of someone having recorded anything of Nickelflix is virtually zero. Though, of course, I would love to be proven wrong. Let me state for the record that if new footage of any of these old shows ever becomes available, I will do an addendum video on the matter. Because of this, we don't know exactly what film serials Nickelflix managed to air. We can, however, make some educated guesses. On October 12, 1979, Times Union, the local newspaper for Warsaw, Indiana, ran a print ad for Nickelodeon. "At last! Children's programming that's fit for children!" The ad featured descriptions of 5 shows that aired on the channel, including Nickelflix. If this description is accurate, we can construct a rough idea as to what Nickelflix aired, or at least intended to air. There's no indication as to if it got through all of these serials before the show was cancelled. So let's run down the list and see what we've got. Flash Gordon originated as a space opera comic strip created by Alex Raymond in 1934. It tells the story of an athletic college student named Flash Gordon who finds himself having to defend Earth from the evil machinations of the ruler of the planet Mongo, the evil Ming the Merciless, a Fu Manchu type villain evoking yellow peril fears of East Asia. He's an evil racist caricature. In space! The comic was adapted into 3 film serials by Universal Pictures: 1936's Flash Gordon, 1938's Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars, and 1940's Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe. Buster Crabbe played the titular Flash in all 3, while Charles B. Milton played Ming. The 3 serials proved to be very successful, and ended up being circulated on television a number of times prior to Nickelflix, including a popular airing on PBS affiliates in 1975, where the serials found a new generation of fans. In many ways, the 1975 airings were a warm-up to the boom in science fiction media in the late 70s, led by Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977. Incidentally, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg actually grew up watching Flash Gordon broadcasts in the 1950s, which were a major influence on their own work. And with the success of the science fiction blockbusters, a big-budget Flash Gordon film was made in 1980. Flash! Savior of the universe! It's like a sci-fi feedback loop. And 1979 was pretty much the exact right time for Nickelodeon to be re-airing these classic serials. Now, only the third serial, Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, is in the public domain, but I don't know if that was a limitation for Nickelflix. Maybe they got the broadcasting rights for all three. In any case, Flash Gordon was the most relevant choice they could have aired. A German Shepherd rescued as a puppy from the battlefields of World War I, Rin Tin Tin was one of the first canine stars of Hollywood, appearing in 27 films between 1922 and 1931, as well as 2 Western serials. There was 1930's The Lone Defender, about a dog witnessing the death of its owner, and a gang of outlaws who think the dog can lead them to the man's gold mine, and 1931's The Lightning Warrior, where again a dog owner is killed and Rin Tin Tin has to help our heroes track down the man who killed him. Both serials are in the public domain. Rin Tin Tin also had a son that carried on his legacy, Rin Tin Tin Jr., who appeared in 3 serials. 1933's The Wolf Dog, 1934's The Law of the Wild, and 1935's The Adventures of Rex and Rinty. Rin Tin Tin accomplished 2 things. He made animal actors a viable idea in show business, paving the way for canine stars like Benji and Lassie, the latter of which will be appearing in Knacks in a future episode. He also made the German Shepherd a very popular breed in the United States, and as a former German Shepherd owner, I am very happy to be existing in the Rin Tin Tin timeline. The print ad starts listing actors, the first of which is Buster Crabbe. This may be a bit of a redundancy, another reference to Nickelflix airing Flash Gordon, but he was in other serials. An Olympic gold medalist in swimming, he had a natural physicality to be an action hero. One of his early serial roles was in 1933's Tarzan the Fearless, though that one probably didn't air on Nickelflix as the serialized version is considered lost. Only a feature-length edit of the story exists. More likely to have aired was 1939's Buck Rogers, which is funny because Flash Gordon was made to compete with the Buck Rogers comics by Philip Francis Nowlin, who tells the story of a World War I lieutenant who ends up in suspended animation and wakes up in the year 2419. Buck Rogers also made a comeback in the late 70s. A theatrical re-release had the tagline, "Star Wars owes it all to Buck Rogers" on its poster, and on March 30th, 1979, 2 days before Nickelodeon made its premiere, the pilot for Buck Rogers in the 25th Century aired in theaters, leading to a 2-season television show on NBC. The original serial is not in the public domain, but if they were capable of getting it, I'm sure Nickelflix would have aired it to take advantage of interest in the franchise. Tom Mix was primarily a star of silent westerns. Out of the 291 film projects he was involved with between 1909 and 1935, only 9 were sound pictures. You may have seen Bruce Willis play him in the 1988 film Sunset. Now, this one's easy, as Max only appeared in 1 film serial in his entire career. In fact, it was his very last film project, 1935's The Miracle Rider. Mix plays a Texas Ranger attempting to stop an oil baron from driving off a tribe of Native Americans off their land in order to mine the rare element X-94, a super explosive. Okay, so it got a bit silly. This serial is surprisingly sympathetic to the plight of the Native Americans for a product of Hollywood. It is kind of a shame it loses itself in its sci-fi B-film nonsense. I should hope that John Wayne, the most famous classic Western star of all time, needs no introduction. I mean, who can forget the time he played Genghis Khan? Anyway, Wayne was in 3 serials. 1932's The Shadow of the Eagle, about a pilot leaving threatening messages in skywriting. 1932's The Hurricane Express, about a train-wrecking villain named The Wrecker. And 1933's The Three Musketeers, a modern retelling of the classic story. Sort of. John Wayne isn't actually in that one all that much, so this is the least likely of the 3 to be shown if Nickelflix was leaning into star power. Also needs no introduction. Bela Lugosi! It's Dracula! Dracula, baby! He also did a lot of crappy B-movies and drugs, not necessarily in that order. He appeared in 4 serials, the most well-known being 1939's The Phantom Creeps, where Bela Lugosi plays a mad scientist with a giant robot and an invisibility belt. 3 episodes of the serial were riffed on the 2nd season of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Never should have filled up on that 4-alarm chili. Ooh.
And it was the inspiration for the Rob Zombie song Meet the Creeper, 1998. The robot would appear in a lot of Zombie's works. There's also 1936's The Shadow of Chinatown, a bit of a gangland drama, and 1937's SOS Coast Guard, another mad scientist yarn. But the one Bela Lugosi serial I want to bring attention to is 1934's The Return of Shandu, which marks one of the very few times Bela Lugosi played the good guy. He plays a sorcerer fighting other sorcerers. It's basically Doctor Strange before Doctor Strange. Gene Autry was a singing cowboy, which at one point was actually a viable career. For real though, Autry had a really impressive and fascinating career. He's considered one of the founders of country music. He acted in 93 films, he had a 91 episode TV show, he owned the Los Angeles Angels, he wrote Here Comes Santa Claus. He has 5 stars, 5 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He has a town named after him. He became a pilot in World War II after he was already famous. On his radio show Melody Ranch, he promoted racial tolerance, religious tolerance, and respect for women. Also, he was a Freemason, which I think makes him 2 steps removed from the Illuminati. Gene Autry was in one film serial, because apparently he did at least one of everything. 1935's The Phantom Empire, and it's my favorite out of all the serials we've talked about. It's a science fiction western musical where Gene Autry plays himself running a radio show out of his ranch, but it turns out his ranch is right over a secret, technologically advanced subterranean civilization ruled by an evil queen, and Autry has to team up with 2 members of his fan club to deal with them. And also there are criminals trying to break into the underground city to steal its radium. And it's just so earnest with how goofy it is. Okay, still not sold? The guy who wrote it, Wallace McDonald, he came up with the idea while under gas for a tooth extraction. You've probably thought, man, this movie is crazy. I bet they were high when they were making it. This is one of the few times that's actually true. Again, this is all a possibility of what might have aired on Nickelflix. The ad may not have been accurate, and the show may not have gotten through all of these before it was cancelled. I don't know if a serial being in the public domain or not affected its chances, and I don't know how much star power determined what was chosen. Nickelflix is a show we can only create in theory, our best archaeological guess as to what it was all about. However, there is one piece of the puzzle I have deliberately obscured because I knew it would overshadow all the history we've been talking about. The question of the hour: who exactly was behind Nickelflix? Just because it was a simple show doesn't mean it appeared out of thin air. Somebody had to make it, and somebody did. The writer, producer, and host of Nickelflix is John Moschitta Jr. You may not know his name, but you probably know his voice.
Okay, Eunice, travel plans. I need to be in New York on Monday, LA on Tuesday, New York on Wednesday, LA on Thursday, New York on Friday. Got it? Got it. So you want to work here? What really makes you think you deserve a job here?
Well, sir, I think on my feet I'm good at figures and have a sharp mind.
Excellent. Can you start on Monday?
Yes, sir, absolutely, without hesitation.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
This is the Micro Machine Man presenting the most miniature motorcade of Micro Machines. Each one has dramatic details, terrific trim, precision paint jobs, plus incredible Micro Machine pocket play sets. There's a police station, fire station, restaurant, service station, and more.
Somebody's instant rice has been suggesting it's just as fast and reliable as minute rice. Don't you believe it? To prove our point, my wife Gladys volunteered to cook up a couple of her favorite minute rice dishes.
Hey, it's me again, the guy who can't stop, won't stop, on a comfy leather seat with lots of leg room and free direct TV, not to mention all the snacks I can eat, and boy, I can eat a lot of snacks. Let's hear it for the snacks. High 5, low 5, medium 5, no 5, doesn't matter. You can't stop me because that's why they call me Mr. Nonstop.
When Nickelodeon launched, Pinwheel moved its production to New York City, but everything else stayed in Columbus, Ohio, sharing the resources that were still being used to produce Cube, including Mike's Whiz Kids, the crew Cube's programming head Michael Dan put together, consisting of a mix of Children's Television Workshop alumni and a lot of local talent. One of those talents was a bright-eyed and bushy-mustached 25-year-old named John Moschitta Jr., a New York City native who had been developing a talent for fast-talking since he was a kid.
Well, when I was 12 years old, growing up on Long Island, there was a cerebral palsy fair a few blocks away from my house, and they announced that they would donate $2,000 to cerebral palsy for anyone that broke a Guinness record. So first I wanted to ride the roller coaster at Coney Island, so I called Coney Island, and they said, hey kid, take a hike, you're 12 years old, we're not going to let you strap yourself into the cyclone for 2 weeks straight. So I went home and started flipping through a book and decided I wasn't going to eat a car, swallow lead pipe, so the next best thing was to lock myself in a room and teach myself how to do the fast talking. I also had 5 sisters, so I had a little bit of a head start.
However, I found no evidence that this talent was utilized during any of his time with Cube or while hosting Nickelflix. Like a lot of Mike's Whiz Kids, Moschitta did a bit of everything to make sure Cube had plenty of content over its 10 community channels, including being the understudy of Columbus's most famous clown.
I got a job working in Columbus, Ohio on the world's first two-way interactive cable system. It was called Cube, Q-U-B-E, it was for Warner Brothers. Warner Communications, and people could actually sit in their living room and you could ask them questions and they could push buttons on a box. And the computer system that ran that system took up 2 warehouses.
Oh, wow.
Now you could do it on your laptop,
Yes.
but back then it took 2 warehouses.
Wow.
I was on TV every day doing one show or another. They had a show that was like a bozo kind of show. It was called Flippo's Magic Circus. Flippo, the analogy I always use is Bob Hope is to America as Flippo is to Columbus. He actually had a chain of fast food restaurants, and he was one of the big local stars, and he was a big get him to go over to this cable channel. And whenever he would go on vacation, I would be Muggsy the Clown, and I would fill in for him. We had a gong show kind of show where the people at home could gong them. It was called Talent Search, and I would host that occasionally. And I had my own kids show called Short Circuits, which was about a handyman, less height, but my friends call me Lester for longer. And it was fun. It was a great education, believe me.
It's clear that Moschitta had an indomitable work ethic during his time with Cube, which is probably why he was given his very own TV show.
And Nickelodeon was just starting at the same time, so they had built these studios in Ohio, so all the Nickelodeon shows were done in Columbus in the beginning. Nickelflix was, I played like a Sidney Greenstreet kind of character in a white suit and a Panama hat and a big rattan chair, and I did wraparounds for cliffhangers, the old cliffhangers from the movies.
Okay.
You know, YouTube has spoiled us. Nowadays, anyone with a microphone and a cheap video editor can create their own show, have it hosted for free and accessible to anyone with internet access. Moschitta had to work his ass off to get the opportunity to create something that really isn't that much different from what I and a lot of other YouTubers do today. Creating an entertaining persona and having fun with old media? That's me. That's the angry video game nerd. That's Channel Awesome. That's a not insignificant percentage of YouTube's content. Except the barrier of entry for us has been ridiculously low compared to what you had to do in 1979. Nickelflix may be the perfect example of how our relationship to entertainment media has changed dramatically over the last 40 years, about the spaces in which media competes and the size of the arena it's competing in. The creation of cable television was the most major expansion of that arena since the creation and popularization of television in the 1950s, going from a handful of regulated airway stations to a large number of unregulated, company-owned, specialized channels whose only real limitation was what the market was willing to pay for. And that arena is tiny compared to what we have now. I don't own a cable subscription because I feel my entertainment needs are handled pretty sufficiently in the expanded arena of streaming services and the free market of video platforms. There is so much media competing for my time that paying for cable would feel like a redundancy. We are spoiled for choice, both as viewers and as creators. We live in a world that a show where a guy intros and outros old film serials does not need an expansive resume and a good work ethic. You just get a camera and make it. And you'll probably reach the same size of audience as Moschitta did in 1979. I don't know if I should be happy for us now or sad for them then. By the way, on the question of finding footage for Nickelflix, we'll almost certainly never find VCR recordings of the show, but maybe we can go directly to the source. Maybe Moschitta has some master tapes of the show he created. Yeah, unfortunately, that's a dead end.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't even have any. When I moved from Columbus to L.A., I put everything in storage, and the guy who was my agent for the storage acid washed my check.
Wow.
Made it out to him.
Wow.
Cashed the check, and then, so I had never paid for the storage, and unbeknownst to me, they sold all my stuff at public auction.
Wow, that's insane. Wow.
So all my tapes, literally hundreds of hours of TV shows that I did when I was in Columbus.
That sucks. So yeah, unless the person who bought the contents of John Moschitta's storage unit still has the tape somewhere, we should consider Nickelflix lost to the sands of time. Thankfully, we haven't lost Moschitta himself. In 1981, Moschitta made an appearance on the ABC show That's Incredible, demonstrating his fast-talking abilities, which got him a lot of public exposure that landed him a role in the FedEx Fast-Paced World campaign. This would end up being a massively successful, award-winning ad that would launch Moschitta into a career as that guy who talks really fast. People my age probably know him best as the Micro Machines man, but he did ads for Minute Rice, Quality Inn, Northwest Airlines, Continental Airlines, JetBlue, Mattel, Tiger Games, Burger King, Post Cereal, you name it, he's probably done it. Not to mention being a reoccurring voice actor for the Transformers franchise, the announcer for the 2003 version of Hollywood Squares, roles in Sesame Street and Square One TV. Yeah, I could spend another hour going over Moschitta's resume. He's just someone you're glad exists. He's one of those funny and wholesomely pleasant people that always gives good interviews, and you just want to shake his hand and tell him about all the Micro Machines you had as a kid. Out of all the lessons we can take away from Nickelflix, from this lost and forgotten program, from John Moschitta Jr. and, oh heck, Gene Autry as well, one I'd like to take away is that failing doesn't make you a failure. Sometimes the things you put a lot of hard work into just isn't going to pan out. But that doesn't mean nothing will. And just because your life didn't go the way you planned, it doesn't mean your life won't be worthwhile. Embrace many things, and one of those things is likely to lead you somewhere wonderful.
Nick, 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 Nickelodeon. Nick, 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 Nickelodeon.
Next time on Knacks, another show with no existing footage, so instead we'll discuss Nickelodeon's original aesthetic, and if you can actually get a good TV show from that aesthetic. Today's shout out goes to the Saturday Morning Rewind Cartoon Podcast, whose interview with John Moschitta Jr. you've been hearing throughout this video. They have also done interviews with other Nickelodeon alumni like Mark Summers, Lane Torren, Michael Bell, and so many more. Links to the podcast in general and Moschitta's interview specifically are in the description below. If you'd like to support Knacks or the Pop Arena in general, consider contributing to my Patreon. One perk you might like is, for just $1 per video subscription, you can get your own works advertised as part of a rotating block at the end of my Goosebumps, Everworld, and Doctor Who book guides. But if you can't, no worries. You can always help the Pop Arena by liking, sharing, and subscribing. See you next time.